All right, welcome everyone to Further into the Deep, a continuation of our series on AI and deep learning. Our presenter, Don Helms, is with us today. He is the vertical market manager for CBC. And we're going to jump right in.
Greetings, everybody. Welcome into Further into the Deep. We're going to dive a little more into the AI learning today and talk about deep learning, analytics, and AI. If good, move the next slide, please. So, what is AI? Um, Basically, AI or deep learning is a neural network of learning layers. A great example of this is as children, we can learn and continue to learn by trial and error basis. Each day we see things and we take things into our own mind, and that data is stored in our mind, and we continue to analyze that over time. And then over time, we can start to ascertain what's correct or incorrect. Next slide, please. Also, in many industries, as well as security, this type of AI learning is becoming more relevant uh, than traditional analytic learning. In deep learning, much of the human brain over time can start to learn and do tasks. We learn by experience, and we begin to develop a certain type of skill set. Uh, let's go ahead and move on to the next slide, please. AI utilization in the physical security arena can accomplish many things. Besides, it will filter out large amounts of data. We can start to predict behaviors, provide risk analysis, and with the utilization of certain tools, can start to develop a proactive response. So we learn, and with these tools, we can start to do some programming in order to initiate actions. Next slide, please. Predictive analytics. With all these tools, we can start to create a user experience for different verticals. That starts to do problem solving in those verticals. We can start to predict intelligence. The term we use, this is basically predictive intelligence, is the term we use for this. What we have been able to achieve is create a tool that is a game changer for many industries. Next slide, please. So what are the key features? Our AI box? Well, it is a cutting edge proprietary deep learning AI engine, which means that we can analyze a whole host of different pieces of information. And through that analyzation, as I mentioned before, start to look for certain types of things: intrusion, occupancy, loitering, potentially entering and exiting of the scene, line crossing, behavior analysis. And as we start to develop, we start to learn, develop new things. We can start to do a whole host of different things with this data. It can be utilized with any ONVIV based VMS. We can tie that into NVRs, DVRs. It can be used and is used quite frequently in alarm monitoring. And all this can be done through utilization in the RTSP mode. Today, we're integrated with our Corporal system. We're integrated with Immix, Sentinel, SafeStar, Cronus, and with OnViv capabilities, we find ourselves being able to integrate up to a whole host of different types of products that are out there today. Next slide, please. So let's talk about this a little bit. These are all of the options that are available in our AI box. The things you'll notice over on the left, those are considered built-in features. So right out of the box, in every box, you get the capability of doing object detection, object tracking, line crossing, loitering in the scene, entering and exiting in the scene, and also noticing anything that might be stopped in the scene. Classifications are standard as well, that we can today get human, vehicles, bicycles. There are some ready options that are available. These are separate licenses and sometimes with different hardware in the box. They're called ready options that will include facial recognition and license plate recognition. More other things we can start to do with this are customization. Now, our customization is a special NRE based scenario where we can start to develop a whole lot of rules, a whole lot of challenges. People that might have challenges for special things, we can develop customization for them. And this can be examples of vehicle types, maybe looking to omit or are looking for certain types of animals, certain types of clothes, or maybe safety equipment. Or we can start to develop looking for behavior. Maybe we're looking for somebody that's always using a cell phone, or somebody's eating or drinking, or anything along those lines. Those are all customized features that we can do. Let's move on to the next slide, please. This is basically a sample system overview. We do a lot of work in the remote video monitoring world. So as you can see, the AI box can interface into an alarm system, as well as from a standard recorder or NVR that might already have cameras on the systems. We just take a lower resolution feed into the box, and then from there we can go ahead and send out the events. So in this case study, this is based on RVM as well. Issues in the RVM market is basically what they're trying to accomplish is the best alarm or the most effective alarm for the cost. That means in the old days, you could have had a team of people watching 50,000 alarms a day through the motion detection or other types of solutions that are out there. Doing that in the central station environment for video causes a very, very low ROI. What this system allows us to do is basically increase that ROI and increase the effectiveness of the alarm. Once we increase the effectiveness of the alarm, that whole central station becomes more profitable. They're doing more with man hours. And that's a key component to what we can do as a solution in that particular vertical. And then that allows them to start creating other services as well that they may not have thought about besides just the alarm events, which we can certainly dive into a little bit further as we go. Next slide, please. So some of the basic things we can do object classification, like I said, of humans, cars, and bikes. We can create virtual fences in difficult conditions such as low light sensitivity. Some of the BI things we can do, excuse me, some of the basic things we can do is start to maybe identify some occupancy management. What do we mean by that? So let's talk about hotels, for example. When you walk up to a hotel, like a show in Vegas or something like that, how do you know it's time to add more personnel on that front desk? Well, you might be able to do that through occupancy management. We can start to do fast object classification. We can start to detect illegal parking detection, or we can combine multiple rules. We can start looking for different things through multiple rules, such as loitering, virtual fence combination. Maybe on a boat, we can start to look for man overboard type things, or we can start to do national park inter-exit management, so we can see how many people are actually in there. Maybe determine whether we've got some missing people somewhere. Maybe we can start to detect some wrong way driving capabilities, or somebody's going the wrong way at an airport, or someone's going the wrong way in a one-way road. One of the big things we're starting to run in more and more each day is railway things. What can we do to start to see what's happening in a railway? I mean, what do we do to protect people that might be crossing a railway or vehicles crossing a railway? What we can do as far as is getting notifications on multiple channels. A lot of things out there are still very much one-to-one. Or let's talk about schools, playgrounds. What do we got as far as prohibited objects in those areas of concern? So there's a lot of just out-of-the-box capabilities that are very different from most things that are out there today. Let's move on, please. Let's talk a little bit about the AI box options. Next slide, please. So we talked a bit about LPR. That is a separate piece that we have in the capabilities that can be utilized with some of the light basic security implementations as well, combining the two technologies and allowing us to make the best use for our buck in certain areas of concern. We actually can notify through a black-white list, and we can start to determine whether that vehicle is supposed to be there or not supposed to be there. Or maybe we're looking at a long line of vehicles coming through a certain area. These capabilities are relevant to our industries that we have out there today. Next slide, please. What about facial recognition? That's a little bit of a separate license that we can start to put together, tie that into certain access control systems. Again, utilizing that same type of a solution where we can go unapproved, approved, or employee. We can also take this particular solution and tie it into other facial recognition databases that we might have to use. But it does have its own out-of-the-box database there, so it is an effective tool. Next slide, please. What if we have an area of concern that requires some privacy masking? As you can see, we're getting good images off the people where that little square is at, but we're also masking out the people in the other areas. That capability can be done through AI as well as utilizing some of our zones and rules in order to create better effectiveness in that environment. So there's a lot of different projects that are out there that are utilizing that. So customization features. Now let's talk about customization a little bit before we move on. Customization is a NRE-based type environment. When we start to identify customization, we want to look at an end user who has a specific need and utilize these tools. Once we identify what we need to do for that end user, we take this particular set of tools and learning, we go back to our engineering. The programming, no, you'd be very, very surprised, Tom. We can dive into that towards the question and answer period. We'll make a note of that, please, if you would, Alyssa. As we look at the customization piece, we take that back to our engineering team, and over a period of time, we take a combination of if an end user has certain needs or certain concerns in that environment, we start to identify what our tools can do to make those things happen. Once that's done, we can take that out to a site and do some basic learning of that site, say over a 30-day period of time. And once we do that, we can then at that point in time make that be used. Say if it's something for a chain of Amazon warehouses, well, we can make that particular solution applicable for all the Amazon warehouses, because in many different instances, they would have the same common problems on each area or each warehouse. In this particular solution that we've got up here, we were looking for helmet recognition. And can you rerun the video, please, Alyssa, on that? So as you can see, we're factoring. You can see in some of the places in the back, they're identifying 60, 40, 75% probability. We're looking for higher probability that there's an actual helmet on the head. Once that is notified or noticed, we then can set up a notification if need be, or a notification if there's not one on a head, or something along those lines, utilizing rules, utilizing other tools that might be in there. Let's move on, please. Let's look at behavior recognition. In this particular solution, we started to identify whether someone is using or eating or doing something in that particular behavioral recognition. Just another example of what we can do once we've identified what we need to do as a solution. Maybe we need to look at different places, like if someone's utilizing their cell phone or someone needs to do that. I mean, those are all behavior recognition type things. We can start to identify more and more of those. And then as we have a specific end user, of course, we would want to make sure it's the right end user and it's the right solution for them once again. And we can make those things happen for them with a little bit of time learning on the sites. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Object recognition. We have the capabilities of reading labels, identifying what those products might be. Just another example of what we can do through specialty customization. So let's move on to some of the features and benefits of the AI box. So what's the difference between AI and traditional analytics? Let's start with the traditional analytics side. Typically, we're looking into a static environment. What we're looking for is identifying, in many cases, um, pixels, looking at what we can do with those pixels, what we can identify from those pixels based on what the learning engines would be. Once that's done, we can start to add zones and rules to it and try to get a solution from there. AI analytics are a little bit more dynamic. We can figure out why and how. It's really driven by data and data analysis. We put the data into the solution, get the historical output, again, going back to some of that basic rudimentary learning, and then we can take that algorithm and utilize that algorithm and through training start to develop solutions. Let's move on to the next slide, please. So what that does is that gives us, as a whole, improved operator efficiency. We can start to identify what alarms are true, what ones aren't. So again, going back to what we talked about before, making the best alarm for the best money, for the best solution. And then what some of the trade-offs on that are is operators are only receiving true alarms to review. We're going to reduce the likelihood of operator fatigue, because if you go back to the old days when you had 50 operators sitting there watching, 50,000 alarms a day, I mean, how many times were you really getting a good alarm? If we use Guard Force, for example, looking at the old guards, they would never really look at that anymore. And so that became a problem over the years that has slowly but surely been reduced over time. So the efficiency does get better. And then we can scale up sites with more sites, actually, with the same number of staff in utilizing that central station environment solution again. Move on to the next slide, please. We can also respond faster. Okay, what does that mean? We're getting true events rapidly. Those events can be sent to our corporal system very quickly. They can be sent to other VMS systems very quickly. They can be sent to a guard. They can be sent to a security specialist. They can be sent just about anywhere faster. And we're doing this with 90% fewer false alarms. So we're not wasting money. We're not wasting cost. We're giving the best bang for the buck on these alarms, basically. It's also reducing the average response times. Yes, we'll get to that in just a second, Tom, when we get a little bit further. We can offer better competitive SLAs. We can improve overall loss and prevention standards. Let's move on, please. We can grow security businesses faster. We're giving you better ROI. We're reducing alarm traffic. We're able to scale businesses up quicker. AI Box can be hosted on a central a verification center or an Atmosphere. In time, we're hoping to develop its own cloud for this as well, which will be something that will be coming down the pike, but we think that will also add a very big value added solution for you and the end users. Let's move on, please. Overall, it's a better customer experience. They feel more confident about the solutions. They feel more confident about the services. Next slide, please. So let's talk about the specifications. And Tom, this is where we'll dive into your questions. Gantz AI Box today comes in a 4 or 16 channel appliance. Again, it does integrate with Quartrel. It does integrate with SureView MX, SafeStar, Cronus, Sentinel Security, and through the RSTP capabilities, it will continue to integrate, and also through the OnViv capabilities, it will integrate to a whole lot of other solutions as well. Next slide, please. So here's your question, Tom. This might help. On the 4-channel box, you'll notice you've got USB ports. On the 16 channel, you got USB ports. There's 2 on both of those. If you look, you've got 2 different HDI monitor inputs. On a 4-channel box, you get a single Ethernet input. On the 16-channel box, you get 2 Ethernet inputs. That gives you more scalability and flexibility. So that's a whole lot different than some of the older technology we've been utilizing in the past, but it really, really helps in the solution side of things. We also have alarm in capabilities for alarm input. We also have reply connection to the terminal or for relays. That's going to be more of a question for Keith, but we'll get to that. I'll save that question for when we get to the question and answer period. RS-485 is there, and of course the 12-volt adapter. Let's move on to the next slide, please. Basic configuration. The AI engine encompasses a detector. It encompasses a tracker, a recognizer, a behavior analyzer, a false alarm filter. The event trigger has the false alarm trigger as well, a counting trigger, a system trigger, a recognition trigger, which is optional. And then combined with other triggers, we can do more things for customization. On the event action side, we have a network action handler, a systems action handler, and then also the pre and post snapshot capability. On the analytics report side, we have a visitor analytics report that can be very different as we start to unravel some of the new technologies that will be coming. A queue management report, a heat map report, pathway report. That'll allow us to start doing some basic business intelligence right now, but as we start to evolve more, we're looking at some more dynamic business intelligence to go with that. The web UI is HTML5 with no plugins. There is an API for OnViv, REST as well. We can do input video channels for 4 channels, 16 channels. On the 4 channel, it's 4K, 30 frames a second. 1080p, it's at 120 frames a second. On the 16 channel, it's 4K at 120 frames a second. 1080p at 480 frames a second. Our video input is RSTP or OnViv. Our input video format, H.265 or H.264. Our annotated video, that's an error there. We've got 4-in-1 And we'll get to that in just a second, Tom. 4-in-1 and 16-in-1. The video output stream is RTSP over TCP, RTSP over WebSocket. Monitor out is HDMI ×1, and monitor resolution is up to 1080p for diagnostic reasons. And then let's move on to the next slide, please. So some basic configuration just gives you some examples of how this can be configured. We can utilize that in a very traditional way, utilizing the DVRs or NVRs, either through the cameras or through the NVRs directly. We can, again, monitor that. Then we've got the Ethernet capabilities. So it's very flexible in how this can actually move forward or be dynamic in most of its deployment. Next slide, please. Now we'll start to dive into question and answer period. Now I know there was a couple questions from you, Tom. That's going to be more of a Keith answer on those as far as processing. And then I think you had one of the questions as well. Keith, can you answer those?
Yes. Processor right now on the current versions is a high silicon SoC. From the Ethernet ports, no, it's not set up for load balancing. The idea is on a 16-channel box, you can connect one to your main network, and if you have a separate camera network, the second port is to connect to that to separate it, so the traffic doesn't overlap.
Did that help, Tom? Great. Any other questions? Be happy to answer.
Don, I know you wanted to revisit, was it customization or an earlier part of the presentation?
Oh, from the programming side, there was an early question from Tom again. The AI box, AI in general, one of the benefits to it is you don't have to worry about camera setup like you did in the past with analytics. Was the angle of the camera good? Depth as far as how far you're away from, what you're looking at. So with AI in general, which will include the AI box, you can usually go, with existing camera setups where AI takes out, that prolonged setup function. It learns what it's looking at, the angles it's looking at, and a lot of that stuff. So you don't have to make those adjustments. Now, depending on what you're trying to do within the scene itself, programming is as simple as setting up a single zone where you want people involved. You want to know if people are there? Do you want to know if people crossing the line? Or you want to just know if people are coming in as a person? If you want to stack those things and have a more involved system where if a person comes in the door, goes to a specific area, then you'd have more programming involved. But the programming is based on what you're trying to do in the scene. But in general, the AI makes it, quicker and easier to set up.
I think Tom was saying this is audio.
Yeah, I'm not catching any of that from my side.
Nor am I.
Might be better to message it because it sounds like you have a bad connection.
I don't think he's hearing, but
well, I'll just go down the list. Where's the product manufactured? Right now, it's manufactured in Korea. Can it be customized? Yes, part of that concept is, customization. How that gets done will depend on what you're actually trying to do. You know, it can be as simple as like safety helmet. I mean, from a helmet perspective, there's a lot of public images out there that can be used to start to train what's going on. If for some reason, you know, who we're trying to customize it for is using a very particular, you know, branded product, you know, then we might need to get images and video specifically from that application so we can train it. But training images will depend on what we're actually going after. But yes, it can be customized. From an accuracy standpoint, I don't have the accuracy numbers with me. You could actually go online to gansecurity.com/AI and request a follow-up call, and we can have that
It's
and get that information.
/AI box.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right.
Based on that, you could just go online, just put in a request, and we can follow up with that information.
And if you want to do a one-on-one deeper dive on any of this stuff, please just reach out to the slide that's up right now. We'll certainly be able to set something up with you and get back to you and do some, you know, if it becomes something that you want to do some deeper testing on, we can work something out along those lines as well, or just talk about applications. Again, it's a very open feature, very easy to use, and it's very, very cost effective.
The good thing is it's very agnostic from a camera standpoint, so it does not matter what kind of cameras you're using. Like Don mentioned, RTSP streams from just about any camera, ONVIF, you know, to push out events to even products that aren't specifically integrated. So it is very user friendly for more than just a GANS platform product.
So I think the first question was, Will, just so you know, we're projecting a turnaround time of around 70 to 90 days, depending on how long it takes to develop the solution. We do have to do some drop time on one test site in order to get the learning down. So we figure about 30 days on that, if that makes sense, because we do have to do some learning on those customization features to make sure once the rules, you know, we're looking for the same thing on every site, but, you know, once we can get some of those sample things going out there on the end, get the learning down, then it should be able to be deployable very quickly on the other sites for that particular end user. That makes sense?
CBC itself is a Japanese company. We have offices all throughout Asia, Europe. Right now, the US side, we have an office in North Carolina and an office in Torrance, California. Milestone, we haven't had too many requests. Like I said, most people that are using have really just been using the ONVIF side of it, but it's something we can look at based on a need from an integration standpoint.
Right now, yeah, right now we've got some governmental users that are on the federal side looking at it. I don't know. I think that because of the partnership, it is applicable. It can be utilized, but we haven't really had a chance to put those on the military installations yet, but have had a chance to do some testing with the governmental side. You want to add to that, Keith?
Realistically, current version based on what they need or how they buy is technically not NDAA compliant. Our next version coming out probably within the next quarter, you know, Q2 area, we're working on an NDAA compliant version. So that should have no issues anywhere in the US.
Any of the other
Anybody?
questions? No, it is not. We've you're referring to like a GSI schedule or something along those lines, Tom, right? We haven't done anything with that yet. And if we do, it would probably be on the NDA compliant version, if that makes sense.
There's a possibility once it is NDA compliant, we probably have a few dealers that could put it on the federal schedule, but we currently do not run GSA anymore.
Yes, it is able to filter out the difference between animals and humans through learning. We have had that in its current form out of the box, but now if we're trying to detect a certain type of animal, then that might need some customization.
If you're specifically just looking for a video on that, again, if you could just go to gamesecurity.com/AIbox, put in the request, and we'll follow up with you on that one.
Okay, I think that about wraps it up. If anyone has any further questions, like Keith said, just go to gamesecurity.com/AIbox. Thanks so much for your all's time. We really appreciate it. And thanks, Don, for doing a great job.
No word. Thank you all. And if you have any questions, we look forward to answering them. Y'all have a great and safe day out there.